When people think of iconic railways, their minds often drift to the Alps, the Rockies, or the Orient Express. But far down in South America, there's a lesser-known line that quietly threads through some of the most beautiful and historically rich terrain on the continent. This is Chile's Southern Line Railway, or Línea Sur, a railway that once connected Santiago to the deepest corners of southern Chile. And today, we're diving into its forgotten stories, scenic secrets, and surprising unknown facts. The Southern Line was officially born in the 1860s, during a time when Chile was trying to modernize and link its fragmented regions. What's remarkable is that this railway helped unlock regions that were, until then, accessible only by horse or boat. But here's something few people know. This railway was originally built as a strategic military tool. The Chilean government feared foreign invasion from Argentina across the Andes, and the railway was a way to move troops and supplies swiftly south. Many towns in the Araucanía region, including Temuco, owe their very existence to the railway. In fact, the city of Temuco began as a military outpost, and the railway was extended there specifically to assert Chilean control over indigenous Mapuche territory. And here's a rare gem. The original Temuco station still stands, one of the last examples of classic 19th-century Chilean railway architecture. It's a monument to the era when the train meant everything. One of the Southern Line's greatest engineering feats is the railway bridge over the Bio River near San Rosendo. When it was completed, it was the longest iron bridge in South America. But few know that its parts were actually imported from France, shipped across the Atlantic, and hauled inland using oxen. It took years, and the effort was so massive that locals called it the bridge built on sweat and iron. This railway doesn't just carry people. It carries stories. Along its route, you'll pass through valleys where German settlers arrived in the 1800s, encouraged by the Chilean government to populate the south. Their cultural traces still remain: wooden chalets, Lutheran churches, and even German spoken by older generations. Some stations along the Southern Line have fallen silent, but not forgotten. Estación Reneco, for instance, is rumored to be haunted. Locals talk about seeing phantom trains and hearing whistles in the fog, remnants, perhaps, of the many accidents that plagued this line in its early years. Perhaps the most beautiful part of the Southern Line's story is its steam era. The trains that once ran here were British-built, massive iron beasts that chugged through forests, rivers, and volcano views. And here's something wild. Chile was one of the last countries in South America to use steam locomotives for regular service, well into the 1990s on some segments. Today, the Southern Line isn't dead, it's being reborn. The Tren de la Araucanía, a heritage steam service, still runs for tourists between Temuco and Pitrufquén, keeping the past alive, quite literally on rails. What makes this line special isn't just its scenery, though the views of volcanoes like Lima and Villaritza are jaw-dropping. It's that this railway has become a living museum, powered by volunteers, rail fans, and a deep local pride. For many in southern Chile, this railway isn't just infrastructure, it's identity. It carried immigrants, soldiers, schoolchildren, even poets. It helped shape modern Chile in ways the highways never could. Largely built by prison labor, much of the early construction of the Southern Line was done using prison labor and conscripted indigenous people, especially in the most rugged terrains. This was a common practice in 19th century Chile, but it's rarely discussed in official histories. It once reached Valdivia via a wild spur, a lesser-known spur of the Southern Line once connected to Valdivia, a city deeply isolated at the time. The line there passed through areas so swampy and difficult that workers called the region the railroad that swallowed tools. Entire carts and rails were known to vanish into the mud during rainy seasons. Volcano-proofed sections after the volcanic eruptions of Lima and Villaritza, parts of the Southern Line had to be rerouted or elevated to survive future lahars, mudflows. A surprising number of current tracks in southern Chile were moved slightly uphill from their original alignments because of volcanic danger. A secret wartime role in World War II. During World War II, while Chile remained officially neutral until 1945, the Southern Line was quietly used to transport rare timber and minerals that ended up supporting Allied industries via ports like Talcahuano. The route became a hidden logistics corridor, especially when maritime transport was threatened by German U-boats off the Pacific coast. First railway electrification plans were here, and abandoned in the early 20th century. Chile made ambitious plans to electrify the Southern Line, way before other South American countries. However, due to political instability and cost overruns, the project was abandoned halfway, leaving some tunnels widened and prepared for overhead cables that were never installed. Hidden snow tunnels in the south. As the Southern Line pushed further into colder regions, wooden snow tunnels were built to prevent snowdrifts from burying the tracks. Few of these survive today, but some remain hidden in overgrown forests between Temuco and Osorno, slowly rotting into the trees like ancient relics. Train-carried forests. During Chile's massive logging boom in the early 1900s, entire forests were harvested and carried south on the trains. Whole railcars were stacked 5 meters high with logs, earning this part of the line the nickname, El Ferrocarril del Bosque Perdido, the Railway of the Lost Forest. An experimental compass train in the 1930s, an engineer named Gustavo Gralmas tested a magnetically guided train prototype between Chillán and Los Angeles along a stretch of the Southern Line. It was meant to use a compass-based directional system to auto-steer the train, but magnetic interference from nearby ore deposits derailed the concept, literally. The longest non-electrified route still active to this day, parts of the Southern Line remain the longest operational non-electrified railway in Chile. Unlike the electrified Santiago metro lines or some industrial lines, these segments still depend on diesel locomotives, making the journey feel authentically retro. Mapuche resistance once sabotaged tracks in the early 20th century. As the railway expanded into Mapuche territory, there were documented cases of sabotage, where rails were removed or misaligned. These acts were part of indigenous resistance to forced displacement and military presence brought in by train. Mobile markets on board. In the 1960s and 70s, the Southern Line hosted onboard vendors selling everything from tamales to wool, leather goods, and small livestock. In fact, some cars were semi-formal mobile markets, with local artisans hopping on and off to sell their wares between stations. The Southern Line Railway may not be famous, but it's rich with stories, ghosts, legends, and untamed beauty. It's a journey through Chile's spine, not just geographically, but culturally. If you're looking for a train trip that's off the beaten path, this is one that quietly waits, humming through the trees of Araucania. Thanks for riding along. Catch you next time.